Welcome back to Healthcare Business Growth Conversations. Today, we are diving into the uncomfortable truth about the mental health business. How do specialists survive when the generative AI is changing client cognition and clinical ethics are being challenged? Joining us is Dr. Bechor, a PhD in child and adolescent psychology with expertise in evidence-based treatments like ERP and CBIT. She is the founder of her own bootstrapped family-centered practice, launching full-time right now. We are exploring her strategy for growth, covering automation, AI, referring models, plus her take on whether the future of human-to-human therapy means the end of empathy. If you're struggling to stand out, this episode is your strategy guide. Dr. Bechor, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, so Dr. Bechor, you are launching a private practice in a very strange era. Technology is everywhere, and the old ways of doing things are rapidly shifting. Let's start, with the business side of that survival. As I said, now AI is taking over. I won't say therapy, but most of the people are depending on AI for the basic interaction, for even for a small question to the therapy related questions. Now, how does a specialist like you, justify that you still are in this niche and then prove that human family centered model is still essential?
It's a great question. So I think I want to start by saying that when people are seeking out help with mental health, I think initially, before they really know anything, they really want relief and certainty. And those are great, I think, in the short term. But I think the problem with the accessibility right now of artificial intelligence and that it is just so cheap and available, I think it offers a false sense of security right off the bat. And I think that what's really going to drive outcomes is relationships. I mean, people, I think, have to understand that it's more like an encyclopedia, even if it's an encyclopedia that like talks to you and makes you feel really positive, which AI is pretty much designed to do, which is fortunate in the moment, but unfortunate if people mistake it for a replacement for treatment. Treatment is so much more about human relationships, change over time. And quite frankly, it's actually about being uncomfortable. That's a really big takeaway, I think, in the AI conversation when it comes to evidence-based practice. Because one thing I know about evidence-based practice, which is 100% what I do and what I've learned, in schooling and now as an early career psychologist, just as AI is really taking off, which is influencing how I do things, but I still got sort of educated in a time where AI really wasn't that available at all. I'm being able to look at it from the side and say, okay, so it's super positive, it regards you well, and it gives you decent information, right? You can look up your symptoms and see maybe criteria for, and that will help you with uncertainty in the short term. However, it's really, really important to take away already, like just to opt that in this conversation, that it's really no replacement for human relationships whatsoever. I recommend for everyone just to use AI as more of a guide, more of a list of suggestions that are very cold in a sense. And my end on the clinical side is noticing that, families are growing and changing. We need to nurture relationships and make people more present in their relationships. And AI can suggest, being more present, but it's really nowhere near what it sounds like in treatment. Treatment actually is much more about being uncomfortable. And AI tends to also say to you, oh, don't worry, you're doing fine, or that's never going to change. I mean, I've seen actual examples of AI gone wrong in terms of people over accessing it. And when I have, it has often been about staying exactly the same. But treatment is all about change. Treatment is about changing with assistance from a coach, which I see the therapist as. Therapist is a coach to tell you, what ways might benefit you if you were to change how you react to something inside. So I'm already, saying this to you and thinking AI could say that to you, but AI is really not designed to make you a little uncomfortable, to help you adapt in the way that treatment does.
Got it. So I just want to know, maybe a little bit of a controversial question, but AI cannot give the prescription, but the therapist can give the prescription. So would that be the sole motivation in the future for humans to go to a therapist?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, generally in psychology, you don't give prescriptions. Usually that's for psychiatrists or mental health nurse practitioners. Even so, I think the core of your question is if it's available, in one way, are they going to flock to you because they can't get it in a different way? Listen, I think time will tell. I think overall, people will maybe even try AI more in the short term, just because, again, it's cheap, available, gives relief, regards you positively. And I think that it's possibly going to burn out in terms of not being as human based. I mean, I think what brings people back, and we know this from a lot of research in psychology, is what we call the therapeutic alliance. Historically, it's been well across age, race, creed, geography, and problem, whatever it is. It's what brings people back often is that human connection. So again, it's very available and it provides plenty of relief and certainty only in the moment. But ironically, too, a lot of the treatments that I know that work extremely well are actually about learning how to feel uncertain and increase your capacity for that kind of distress. So overall, I think while, of course, people might say, okay, well, I have to go to a human only because I have to, they might actually go. And eventually, I think human relationships are going to win out.
I just want to take a step back from AI, and then I just want to lean more towards your clinic. You're about to start the clinic in a very interesting time. So, what was the conversation that you had with yourself before making this shift?
Whew, it was a great set of questions too. I think I'm still asking a lot of them. I feel like I'm right at the very, very, very beginning of something. The questions I had to ask myself actually had to do with how much I might use assistance from technology, and also what I can bring on top of what I think families need. It was first driven by families' needs from what I had seen in my career thus far. Then it was about what I could bring, because that's the beginning of scaling, right? You're just one person in a business and you have to see what you can actually translate into an actual business product. And then, of course, I wanted to see how I could use technology, because a lot of my colleagues, with all this technology advancing, were using technology in some ways to enhance what they were doing. So I think I'll answer like all three, and I'll start with what the families need. So across my career so far, I've seen, hundreds, maybe 1,000 kids at this point, and their parents, and even young adults as well. And what I've seen a lot of times is there's just, some kind of, let's call it distress or set of thoughts or emotions or feelings in their body that are stopping them when they want to do something that they really want to do. Now, when they're children, there's a lot in their environment that parents and children aren't aware of that is usually making a problem behavior stay or stopping a problem behavior from ending, right? So I've seen that we often really want to just enhance relationships between parents and children, and if not even young adults or adults with their loved ones. Really trying to see like that, almost like that family unit or like that home unit, far beyond family structure. Just, even if it's an adult with roommates, right? Like what about their environment is reinforcing a behavior that they don't want to continue or that's not working for them. So I'm seeing a lot that across cases, no matter what the problem, that they often need to enhance their own connections with other people, and they have to increase their awareness of how much their feelings or thoughts or just the way that they are influences them in a way they don't want. So it got me thinking about how, for example, I really want to influence the environment. And then I think relationships can do that. And especially with younger children, you can't change a child without changing parents. They're just so connected already in that sense, And also it's even a matter of environment. I think a lot of times people are uncomfortable and then just kind of shift toward comfort, even if it's not very conscious, even if it's not really working for them. So to answer your question, I had to ask myself questions like, in what ways can I ethically and responsibly work with a child, and then also work with parents or vice versa, making sure the lines of communication are what they have to be. In other words, ethically, like sharing information responsibly across the family. I had to ask myself if I could try to become more like a family companion, because I'm really much more of an advocate of how the environment is for a given person, whether it's the parent, the child, young adult, even someone who lives alone. It's like, what about your surroundings changes how you behave? So as a business owner now, I had to think, well, can I try to have a model where I first, pilot it. But overall, just say to a family, hey, sometimes I'll chat with parents, sometimes I'll chat with you as a child or young adult or your roommates, what have you. And I'll just kind of be an advocate for what's around you to be your coach to help you change your behavior. So if I want to try to find a way to make that more into a business initiative, if you will, because it does start with just individual sessions, but I know that I want that to inform what I do moving forward. So like I said, there's that what people need, what the families need. And there's also that like technology question. I want to talk about that because I'm at a really interesting spot in my career. I'm only, 7 years out from my graduation, 5 years out from my licensure. And for AI, just to go back to it real quick, sorry, for AI to be as big as it is and cheap and available as it is, and I think quite good at this point for depending on what you're looking for, you have to make really careful choices as a practitioner and a business owner. You have to ask yourself, am I going to use this for efficiency and to what degree? And I found myself using it for, let's say, speed. So let's say I want to create a handout about a particular diagnosis and I want a family to have it. I might say, can you please generate this for me? But I'm very careful to make sure that what's on there is factual based on what I would put on the paper if I had the time, So as a business owner, I've had to think, how can I make that really like human family relationship centered thing, an environment thing, into more of a product beyond just sessions, which I'm working on for sure. And then also, I really just wanted technology to help enhance what I do. I'll use it for flyers for marketing. I'll use it for trying to help track some of my finances. I'm trying to have it take some of the time out of my day, but there are some things I won't use technology for too. Like I will not use it for charting. I mean, I understand it can probably work. A lot of people are using it. A lot of my colleagues are using it. As of right now, I just want to bring still that human approach to the writing and I just can't right now let go and let AI, help generate my note for me. I'd rather still be the person thinking, okay, what clinical skill did we use today from my perspective as the therapist?
So you define your niche and then the USP as the family companion therapist rather than the individual therapist. That's where the group of people comes into the play, and then the impact of AI would be minimized compared with one-on-one in the individual therapy.
Depending on the case, really depending on the case. I want it to be a feature as opposed to how we do everything, because I really do understand there are going to be some cases where being a family companion isn't going to work. A lot of times parents and children in particular are not on the same page. So it's sort of like until they agree. But I do believe that extra component of saying, hey, I can hopefully see any party within your family or your environment and still advocate for change so much that it doesn't necessarily have to be that I only see you. In other words, it can be a limitation at times where you think to yourself, I can only see one party in the whole household. And it depends on the case. So yeah, depending on the conversation we have, that extra feature, I hope will drive change really well.
Perfect. So like as a business model, you're thinking about building this whole solo practice as a with reciprocation relationships, right?
Yeah, and I think you're talking about referral,
Right.
right? Yeah. I mean, I'm really open to wherever it's going to go. I keep saying to a lot of people, like, once the phone rings even more, I'll make more choices based on demand. And so to talk about referrals and to also talk about shaping things based on, what's needed out there, plus the flexibility. Like I've learned a lot about the psychology of running a psychology business. But I'll start with the referral piece. There's really, it's so interesting to think about psychology and behavior and to be a business owner with all this uncertainty, but then to learn some things either from help from mentors or from friends and family. And I'm like, oh my God, there's a whole psychology to starting a business of psychology. Either way. So it's first about referrals. I would say I want to have reciprocal relationships, and a referral source to me, upon thinking about it more and more, it really can't just be, hey, what info do you have for me? I've learned going into this now as a business owner, especially, you really need to think every time you approach someone, what can I bring to this person? And that is better for relationships. It's also more about your product. And so as I'm getting around the community and also across the country, learning more about referral sources, I'm coming across more awareness that it needs to be an ongoing conversation. Especially for people in my case who are my best referral sources are assessors, people who just do testing on people to figure out what is going on and to get closer to a diagnosis. Once they have that map, they really want like the guide to help someone go on that tour. Once, you know what I mean? And so they're my best referral sources. But I learned on my first day of graduate school ever that you can't have good treatment without good assessment. And I feel like they inform each other throughout the whole journey. So in other words, the person who's making the map for the tour has to still remain online while the person's touring, and vice versa. You have to assess as you go. You can't really just say, here's what's going on and let's change. We have to measure change, So to answer your question, referral sources and reciprocal relationships are great, but they have to remain present. So in other words, if during a case I'm doing some treatment, I want to go back to the assessor. I want to give some updates. I may even want that assessor to come in and keep doing some measures on my behalf, or maybe I do it as well. I mean, as a therapist, I certainly still give questionnaires to people on regular bases and things because I want to see if I can measure change. Also, just to go back about the business of psychology, I'll keep it brief for now, but maybe we'll talk about it more. I would definitely say already, and one thing a mentor of mine picked up on and helping me the first few months and weeks really was flexibility and reminding yourself that what you do on day one doesn't necessarily have to carry to day two, meaning you can always shift, you can always pivot. And that was one thing I, for some reason, just did not have naturally in my understanding when I was really starting out at the beginning.
That's business strategy is vital, but it's built on the foundation of clinical trust. So I want to pivot to some of the more debated topics in the industry right now, especially as we see technology encroaching on the therapy room. So now there is a growing idea that AI feels emotionally safer to confide in than people. As a specialist, does that mean
Sure.
the future of simple mental health support is the end of the relationship for non-complex cases?
I hear your question, right? Because it's such a big problem out there, meaning there's so many people that may not even have, let's say, a diagnosis, but are suffering, even if it's temporary, right? And again, to have something cheap, available, and smart is so great. And it's almost too good to be true if you think about it. But when you really get to know some of the real applications of AI for mental health, the way that people have at least attempted to use it to this point, what you realize a lot of times is it's going to provide more of a temporary relief. Like my understanding from whenever I've seen the transcripts of, let's say, ChatGPT with someone pretty much like in distress, I've seen a lot of positive regard from the AI therapist. I've seen a lot of technical knowledge, and sometimes I agree with it. Most of the time, however, I'm also getting that the AI therapist assumes nothing's going to change, which for people when they're distressed can obviously increase hopelessness and rigidity, and that's what we really don't want in the therapy room. So I would say a lot of times it looks like it's really available and wonderful, but to me, it's sort of like the equivalent of going to a neighbor saying, I'm super upset. What do I do? And they just go, calm down or take a few deep breaths, right? That would help you feel wonderful right away. And there's a value to it, but I don't find it to be a long-term solution at all. I find that, like I said, treatment is much more about getting uncomfortable, getting comfortable, being uncomfortable, increasing your capacity. So my concern a lot of times is if it's the equivalent of someone just coming up to you and saying, you're fine, stop worrying, you're not going to learn how to worry. It's going to just remove uncertainty immediately and give you relief immediately. And in treatment, I would say day to day for my cases that are really successful, that's what we're working on, is decreasing crutches and decreasing ways that just take away your distress. We want to have distress just as much as we want to have a good time. There's actually a fancy word in one treatment manual that I use. It's called equanimity, one of my favorite concepts in all mental health. And it's basically, in my opinion, the challenge to regard everything you experience as equally valuable as everything else. So it's sort of like saying, if you're kind of distressed about something tomorrow, it's not necessarily a thing to avoid. It's not necessarily bad to be worried. That's how you're feeling right now. So we try to increase a lot of acceptance, flexibility, not a lot of judgment, not a lot of classification per se, just being in the moment and accepting how you feel, not approving, but accepting, right? So If I'm saying all this stuff and I'm saying, hey, look, change is hard. Let's work on how you can grow your capacity. I don't sound like an AI therapist already, So I can see people wanting to flock to it. It's very logical. And then that's my concern as the therapist is I live in this space of trying to normalize discomfort or change. And I don't see AI doing that.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's much more human based or relationship based to be able to say, hey, you're uncomfortable. Stay with that feeling for a bit. So, that's going to help you as well.
Exactly, right? Like, AI cannot do, like, I would say, the human level of empathy. I think AI is more about just the logical sequences, step one, step two, step three, and step four, and so on. But as a human, now we add that layer of empathy, and then based on now with case to case, your judgment matters a lot. Where AI cannot do that, at least as of today. We never know what holds in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got to emphasize too, I will take, let's say, a manual that I know and generally the order I know of treatment, and I can flip it. I won't go A, B, and C. I mean, I'm going to go A, F, Z, J. I'm going to just pick from anything. In fact, I've learned over my career and what I've done when I've supervised other people is I've realized as a therapist, you're going to basically know little kernels of information, almost like little modules in your own mind, like a Rolodex, right? And you're going to basically go through and you're going to try to pick what's going to be next in each one. But also it's very not linear. So I don't just go over one module, one module, one module. I often introduce them. And then by, sessions later still, I'm bringing up those concepts. Again, if I was just to go, here's the manual, which I mean, there was time in my career where I had a manual and tried to keep it session 1, session 2, session 3. But I quickly learned that the art of it was much more about knowing all of the things that are to know from my perspective in my training and my experiences, and then to bring them out as I need to. So imagine I have a whole bag of tricks and I go, now this, now this, now this. This is the art. This is really what my job is, to say, hey, you are you in this moment. This is how you're changing. Let's bring out this. So that really deep customization is a thing that so far I haven't really seen, kind of any other entity but a trained human do. There isn't much of a substitute for thousands of hours of seeing how it works and it doesn't work sometimes, and then customizing.
Yeah. So I quickly want to jump onto another topic that is widely discussed right now, which is, you are a family companion therapist. So do you believe the field currently has an overdiagnosis problem, especially when we are labeling normal child behavior as a clinical issue needing expensive treatments?
Yeah, I have to say, I think there's an overdiagnosis problem and I think there's an underdiagnosis problem. And I'm starting to think more and more that the problem accounting maybe for both of those is context. Context. So to start with the overdiagnosis concern, I'm getting the idea that, people just go, okay, this is happening. And usually they're also in distress about it. Like it's just really not, they're not finding that that's how they want things to be or think that they should be. And so they're looking up the information and they're learning, okay, this sort of maybe resembles, or, if it was to go any longer, or if it was to be more extreme, it would be this problem. But again, like I mentioned, there is a lot of certainty when you have a label. I mean, that's what a patient wants a lot of times, right? Someone who's suffering wants a piece of information that accounts for what's going on. Hopefully it's more normalized that way. There's a path for assistance. People want relief and assistance a lot. So there can be overdiagnosis. There can very much be, oh, there's some symptoms of this. And now all of a sudden, my child has this or I have this. I do see that quite a bit. I also see underdiagnosis because a lot of times one problem is misunderstood as another problem. It's really interesting. For example, somebody with a trauma background really can appear to be anxious right in front of you, or inattentive, right? Like not being able to pay attention. And so then you look at what's there and not what's in the origin, and you just go, okay, that's what's going on. And so it's like context is both the problem and not, more often than not, the overdiagnosis problem, I think, is much more about the context. You're not taking into account how many settings, or if there's a certain thing in that environment in particular that's having those behaviors come out. And then for underdiagnosis, it's also pretty much context, because there are some people who, when they're assessing, they just see what's in that flash moment and aren't necessarily informed or trained about that there could be a whole history, or if that happened prior, then you can't say it's that problem. And, it's without being all that vague, the idea would be, yeah, it's much more about context. And it is definitely cautioned, I think, whenever we get a chance as therapists to tell people, your child probably has, or you probably have symptoms of this, but symptoms of something don't make it a full diagnosis, and you don't need full treatment either. Symptoms of something, of course, can be impairing and usually are. But yeah, it's not that you have to fall into a category. So I think that being able to maybe encourage people to think, oh, I have symptoms of, is much more, let's say, I think it's more akin to success in how you're going to seek relief for something. And by the way, it brings up a whole other question of things we learned in graduate school. It's like they say categorical versus continuous. So do I fit into this box, or am I more like 60% of something, And there's always pros and cons of either side, but I know that more recently that the field wants to make it more of a continuous thing, right? Oh, I have 4 of the 9 traits of something versus I totally fit in this box, because that doesn't inform treatment as well. Treatment is much more fluid than that.
Perfect. So for the parents listening, what is your single most important piece of advice on managing the child's AI use today?
Yeah, also a great question too. I want to say that it's reminding me a lot of when technology was taking off 20 years ago. Like, to be totally frank, I got a cellular phone when I was 14. This was 2 decades ago. And I've known over time, I have a device in my hand. Kids out there have a device in their hand. It's so sophisticated. It's a window into everything else. And so I want to say that my message would parallel what's been said about devices in children's hands. And I think I want to add to it a little bit too, kind of going back to the beginning of the conversation. So firstly, it's about presence. It's about the presence of the person in charge, right? Could be a parent, could be a friend, could be someone who's just overlooking the safety of someone. And so overall, I would really want for authorities, again, parents, friends, neighbors, people who are looking out for safety, I would really want them to review the content of what's going on with the AI, whatever it may be. Not different from if, let's say, you have a 12-year-old who's texting, right? You want to go over that content. That device is usually the parent's device, right? This is a family problem, the problem of the threats that can come from technology, So we want for parents to think, okay, look, your problem is my problem, and you have a window to the world, and I'm not always there. So I recommend for parents to normalize checking on the content of what's on the device. That could have been for social media 10 years ago. It could be for AI today. Now, the thing that's underneath all of that I would definitely say is true too, is going back to connections in families and presence. Because one thing I would say that probably every parent I've ever worked with over now 15 years has ever wanted to do was increase their presence with their children, not just in the room, not on a device, not just looking at them, but presence. Like really reacting to them in the moment, or asking them about what they did that day, that week, or what they think of something, their impressions of things. That's what people really want to do. So yes, there's the checking for safety, but above all else, it's presence, right? Like if I'm even texting a friend now at this age, and I'm aware that my mom is going to probably ask me what I did that day, I'm still knowing that her presence is there. So yes, the checking, but above all else, before and after any AI use, we want to try to just increase any, being in the moment with people.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with a social media 10 years ago and then AI today. It's just the technology, and then being present with what kind of content they are searching for, what kind of content they are consuming. I think that's most matter today,
right,
than any day, because I think the content is more democratized today. Now, in good old days, we have to go to library to get a book, and then we got now the social media where people started giving the opinions, and then now we got AI where machines started giving opinions. So
right,
yeah,
right.
you're right. Like, it's a family problem. It is not an individual problem. For that, parents should be listening. and reading to whatever the content the children are consuming nowadays.
And if we went to a library back in the day and then all of a sudden we read someone's opinion in the newspaper, we knew the difference. That is something that I really empathize, I would say, with people that are young and don't have the difference available, right? They're more just, I saw this, and it looks just about as legitimate as another source, no matter what that is. So there's something to be said about having so much available to you, like you said, democratized. They don't necessarily discriminate credible sources. So then there is that a little bit of a burden, I think, on those people that can maybe do it a little bit better, because the way that all this information became available over time taught us what was what the library book is versus someone's opinion as an editorial in the newspaper. Now it's all there, whether it's, let's say, more of a credible source or just an opinion. And so again, there's even more of an onus on the whole family to say, okay, that's happening for us right now. We don't want to believe everything that we read. So we have to work together on this one, especially if adults happen to be able to discriminate and say, that's probably much more hearsay than something factual. It'd be so great if they could pass that along.
Yeah, definitely. So on the same line, like the AI, which is helping us with basic day-to-day tasks to complex research tasks, um, recently, like ChatGPT and those tools went down because Cloudflare went down for a few hours. And then have seen a lot of people around me, they were just complaining about, no, there is no ChatGPT, or now Cloudflare went down. They were just worried about it. And then I took a step back and then I felt like, is this a cognitive pandemic that we are getting into? Like, now, how is constant reliance on these AI tools actually changing the human critical thinking and problem solving?
That's a great question. I think about that as a clinician because a lot of times, like I'm saying, I'm thinking about what's in this person's environment. How much is this person challenged to do kind of whatever it may be, how much does someone have to kind of endure either frustration or have to have patience for something? And I think I want to first comment on, that there is an expediency with AI, and I wish we could just take the best of it and not suffer from any of the negatives, right? Like that's such an idealistic idea. However, awareness is really important when you want to differentiate those things and try to take the best of what it can offer. So if you want to offer efficiency, if you want to just make your life easier, cut out an hour of your day, treat it like a secretary, tell it to, integrate this with this, oh, can you make me a PDF of da 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 da? It sounds so great. What I've realized for people that, have it in their environment, again, not different from if I met somebody from 1920 who, or 1940s who got a dishwasher. Like, I like to take it back all the way to how technology does take out a lot of hard work or repetition or, a little bit of maybe banging your head against the wall. It does make life easier, right? By the end of the day, if that's your entire environment over time, repetitively, you're not challenged to do something. So my only concern now, or my main concern with artificial intelligence, is it can be so expedient that you won't necessarily have racked up those minutes and hours of your life having struggled. Like, okay, so for example, if back in, 8th grade, I had to write an essay and I was looking at a blank screen and I was feeling that uncertainty. What if I don't get this done? What if I don't do well? What if my test or the test that I have to take after is not going to go well? What if my grade is poor or someone thinks I'm a poor writer or something like that, right? What if I never do this right? There's a little bit of a value in having to sit with that blank page, And so if, let's say, I can use some other assistant, back in the day, it was plagiarism or, it was look it up and, to get some quick notes on it and just go do it. Either way, it might take away from the number of seconds that you're actually, in distress. It's not necessarily bad if you do wonder if you're not a good writer or if you're going to make it or if your grade's not going to be good. You know what I mean? So it is probably offering a lot of certainty and comfort, and it might be reducing frustration tolerance and I don't know, more of I call it a natural approach, but even that word is changing if it's just available for people all that time. So I'm not going to say natural. I'm going to say I could understand more the value as a therapist, especially of not having a thing that can do something for you very quickly. There is a value of waiting and knowing it may not happen, and having to dig deep and know what you can do, your own work ethic, your own capability, and that could be interrupted with AI.
Yeah. On the same line, I just wanted go into cognitive offloading, which is now we no longer memorize phone numbers or navigate without GPS. As AI starts drafting clinical notes and then treatment plans, like, are we witnessing the permanent offloading of clinical intuition to an algorithm?
I think it'll depend on how we continue to regard AI. And I'll give you an example. I was at a statewide psychological association convention recently, a few months back, and I can tell you the word AI was in so many of our continuing education courses. We want it to be part of the theme as we have our convention every 2 years. And I could not even get over how much in a day I heard AI. I mean, over and over again. We needed to talk about it, however, and I think that it's much more about our own attitude toward it. And what I learned years back that I still really hold true, that I want to repeat today, is use it for efficiency and make sure you review every word of it. In other words, be very clear. If you're going to use it or rely on it, review it. Try to even go double check on some things in it. Use it responsibly. I wouldn't say there's going to be permanent offloading. I think it's going to be very attractive to have an offloading and to just make things easier. But I mean, we could probably still preserve some of the positives of that. Again, call it resilience or stick to itedness and all that. I really do think we can prevent too much offloading if we decide to have certain attitudes toward AI. Again, more efficiency, more checking on it, more thinking, hey, look, it has its limitations. As a bunch of psychologists, actually hundreds of them at this convention, we were learning and making sure to say to each other in our continuing education courses there, it's going to regard you positively. And as therapists, we just don't do that. We don't just say, you're great, don't change. It's actually that we do kind of the opposite, like I mentioned earlier, right? So the offloading is going to depend a lot on if we continue to remind each other and ourselves that it has its limitations.
Yeah, you're a therapist, and then now you are a business owner. So you're in two different shoes, and then you always want to free up your clinical time because that means now more productivity for you. So, what is the one tool that you're considering on an assistant to free up your clinical time?
Yeah. I definitely admit I use it. I love the efficiency in a lot of ways. I know that I've used it sometimes to get more of an edge on strategies for marketing, actually. More recently, I was looking up one way to get my name out there more than just locally. I literally had looked up, I'm going to go visit a pediatrician's office. What should I do? And it gave me some really great ideas because it's funny how it was so clinical. It was so, actual, but it let me go do something very human. I mean, I already was going to bring my own materials, but it had a whole list of materials out there. It was even offering to give me links to go order customized materials for marketing. I'm like, how awesome is that? That's going to save me so much time. There was even a marketing flyer that I was putting together, and I was trying to think, in my practice, what could be maybe 5 or 10 things. In fact, it was a Thanksgiving themed flyer. So it was about a piece of pie and which piece of pie fits for you. And I already had the idea of the pieces of the pie, but then I asked ChatGPT to actually give me, 10 skill sets and 10 types of treatment that I do that match up. And it did that for me. I mean, I could do that, and it sort of extended my creativity, So far I'm using it for marketing. At times I'm also having it improve my workflow for the intakes that I am doing as well. And more often it's more for the marketing. And I'm learning more also about things that I never knew. I mean, of course, I'm learning about how to manage the finances of the business. And so I'm just asking general questions about, what if I do this, or how is that taxed? And I'm not taking it as gospel. I have my own accountant, thank goodness, right? But I am trying to learn certain definitions through it. And what I like so far about it is it's learned, so to speak, about my practice. So if I say something like, I have to create a 100-word blog because not blog post, I'm sorry, 100-word blurb for a new website or let's say event I'm going to present at. Can you create 100-word blurb about emblem psychology? It does, so it's sort of gotten to know me like a good friend in a way. But of course, I have to review every word of it and edit it the way that I would like it to be. So yeah, I mean, I'll use it for efficiency or to learn some basic definitions. And I liked using it for marketing in these more informal ways because, hey, I didn't learn how to market in grad.
Yeah, definitely. I know because I'm on the other side, running the marketing team and then helping the doctors with their marketing. We get all kinds of questions every day, like sending big lists from ChatGPT or Gemini, asking us to verify the claims or the recommendations. So nowadays it is a hectic task for us because these tools can generate tens of pages of content, and then we have to go through every single word, make sure it is aligned with the strategy, the budgets, the timelines, and everything.
Right. It's like cheers. Cheers to efficiency. Cheers to expediency. It's great, That's the only thing, right? Because we're, again, not to bring it back and kind of be a wet blanket. It's just when we're doing clinical work, often I'm meeting someone for the first time and I'm saying, this is a medical appointment right now. Even if we can't, look at your white blood cell count and say you have depression per se, right? We'd love to do that in the future. We're still doing something very deeply impactful in your life, and it's going to probably require distress and all that. So that there is something there that has made it a lot more factual and maybe even kind of appealing because it's so great for people to just get information. I mean, there's just this like really big need to recognize that it's, if you use it for beyond efficiency and you try to really, really replace a human relationship with it, there's so many risks.
Yeah. So since we're on the marketing talks, I just want to ask you one more question. Like, are there any products or services you're planning to launch to scale your practice?
Definitely. It's interesting how I was even, thinking about this maybe even like 2 years ago, long before I had moved on to trying to start my own practice. It's on my mind all the time, and also it morphs all the time. The same way that we've been talking about how we want something, let's say, cheap and available. But we also want high quality. And we want to enhance relationships, right? We want to enhance the environment in some way. Now, I see a lot of times that parents are leaders, or I want them to be leaders. And I want them to pretty much be the environment or change the environment so much because they can. I mean, that's one of the coolest parts about working with families is there can be certain allies to treatment, depending on the case, but usually they're allies, and they can influence the environment. So to answer your question, I keep thinking in many different ways about some kind of either workbook or treatment companion, like tool of some sort. I really would like for people to have a really cheap and available set of ideas that if they go through them, really flexibly can be applied to what they need. And at first, me with my training, I think that I'm a good start with saying, hey, that concept fits for you right now. But if I ever could find a way to maybe automate it or make a set of principles apply one at a time for what someone's going through, meaning if I could ever create a bunch of if-then type of contingencies within a system, that way someone can not only just read a bunch of concepts and just guess on which one applies, but rather put in a problem maybe, and then like the program maybe like spits out, here's a concept that can help you, like there, I have a really idealistic idea of trying to make it a little interactive, but more monitored by people who know evidence-based work, almost as if like there was a little either website or app where somebody puts in a problem question, particularly about, let's say, parenting or childhood issues, but then there's someone overlooking how it's giving some advice. So there's always going to be concepts out there. We want to apply the concepts like a treatment therapist does, but there has to be more of a human part of it. I would not want that kind of product at all to just be in the hands of someone. I would want, let's say, the therapist to be able to oversee what's going on. In fact, maybe a few years back, I happened to learn of an app that did this more for eating disorders. And it was great. It was one where the patient could take a photo of the food immediately, and then the dietitian could go over it at the end of the day and even like chat with them and encourage them and stuff like that. So I know stuff like this if I'm talking too broadly, that's for some therapy that's being developed for sure. It's there for eating disorders. And I've seen it for other issues like anxiety and depression. But yeah, to answer your question, I really would still want to have my own take on a set of concepts. Again, a workbook or a library, a small little library of really powerful concepts that I think can change the way parents think so that the environments for their families are a lot more conducive to reducing those problem behaviors.
Well, that's really a good thought, and then I think that can become a very good lead magnet for you. Instead of just giving it away for free, just trade that for the information. The first, what we call that as a first party information, just the email, phone number, so that helps with your marketing in a long run.
Yeah. I mean, now if even it wasn't even about marketing and someone coming to me, it still does what I would want it to do. I really still would love to spread some messages out there, to families. I mean, I think a lot of parents that I know, they're very overwhelmed. They often don't always know if a thing that they do or how they react can contribute to a behavior. Again, not to say that's even like fault. I think there's so much less consciousness in our behavior than we all really know. And until, let's say, someone can learn more about these behavioral principles, they're pretty much scientific now. That I would say they're scientific, but they don't know how much those things play a role in their day-to-day lives. So yes, for marketing. And then I would say much far beyond, marketing and a P&L sheet and everything. Like, I really would wish that there was some kind of product that beyond just going to the bookstore and picking up a book, which I think takes a lot of effort, meaning to read the whole thing. I really just want there to be something accessible to a large number of people that just, again, helps people feel more in command of what they're doing in the environments, right? If it's an adult for his own environment, if it's a parent for a child's environment, if it's a young person, like a child who just like learns much more about how objective some disorders can be or how much they belong with other people that have these same kind of problems. Again, maybe not even the full diagnosis, just 40% of a diagnosis, right? Continuously. So I really overall want people to feel a lot less alone and lost and a lot more in command, and of what they're experiencing.
That's the best way of marketing, by constructing the activities of marketing with purpose. That gives deep meaning to whatever you are doing. So now, nothing else can wait. Even the virality cannot wait whenever now you consciously put purpose to your marketing activities. So, is there anything else that I haven't asked you that you want to share with our audience?
I'll also say, great question. So, we are talking about AI, and it's a friend that we're all very cautious about, right? Like, that's what I'm understanding whenever that gets brought in. It's about remaining responsible. People, I guess, like me, especially when they were educated at a time where AI wasn't really readily available, it's remaining very aware of the ways it can steer us away from ethics and away from evidence-based treatment. So there's that AI conversation, right? Other than that, I definitely would want to add that treatment has to have good clinical judgment. It has to be with someone who's a really experienced coach. It's as much how it's not going to work or hasn't worked as it is what has worked. Maybe I could even say it's almost like me taking the car to the mechanic, where like I can ask ChatGPT, what's going on and get my answer, but it's not the same as somebody with, 20 years experience who saw this kind of car and saw what didn't work or what does work, right? It's that human part of training is so much more about what could go wrong and how you recover from it. There's a lot more about resilience and pivoting and flexibility in these systems than it appears. So I could certainly see how, again, it's so appealing to get relief right away or to consult a factual resource. And then it's just not going to be that long-term solution. So I think that's the one takeaway is, technology or temporary resources are so great for the day, but I don't think that they're going to be as helpful to help really generalize what I think people need a lot. They need to respond differently to what they usually respond to in a certain way. They have to get uncomfortable and change routine, and they have to kind of like push their brain to readapt to things, which means they have to be exposed to things that are difficult. So we are often looking for, comfort and ease. And the moment that I can, often coach people to change their philosophy and go, look, maybe discomfort isn't necessarily bad. Maybe I can do discomfort for a little longer. All of a sudden, that's sort of like another vitamin in their diet that they haven't consumed, right? They benefit from that variety. So yeah, overall, getting away more from AI and going just toward like what I really would want to just say. I would say that like there's a lot of error, human connection, judgment, and comfort with discomfort that is so necessary for change that ends up being really successful for those once they really embrace those things.
Oh, that's really a good takeaway. So since you said vitamins, I just want to ask you one more question. Not related to vitamins, it was more on the sleep side. Like, people who are suffering from chronic anxiety issues, they get into the panic attacks or the anxiety attacks. So, what is the one advice that you give them before they go to bed?
There's so many different ways to address that because there's so many different iterations of anxiety that could be going on. There could be future oriented worry. There could be past things. There could be even like memories that are reoccurring to them. There could even be biological reasons why they're not sleeping very well. It's really hard to give one type of like blanket advice.
I just want to add one more point there. I'm not asking you, no, to give a tip to sleep better. I'm asking you, maybe an affirmation that they can say before going to bed, because sleep obviously heals a person. So what would be a routine, or what would be the self-talk, or whatever it is that one can do as a routine before going to bed?
So, I mean, I'm already thinking about the more clinical take on that, which is sleep hygiene. There's lots of, handouts out there. I know I send one out, things like that. And that's going to have your more, let's call it more clinical advice, like fewer screens before going to bed, the half hour before, not associating your bed with activity, trying to keep your bed just for your bed, maybe even reducing naps in the day so you can like actually save up your fatigue and save it for when you want to actually go sleep. So there's some environmental things you can use. It's called stimulus control, right? Like you can make it so you create an environment for sleep. There's a clinical aspect there. Another clinical aspect that probably isn't as much on the nose is where I was going to go with that. It was going to be, while it's extremely unpleasant to not sleep when you want to, what I'm noticing for a lot of people is that there's a logic in it, which is, I'm not sleeping. This is bad. Let me just sleep. Right. And I get that. Like, I really do understand that. Insomnia is terrible. Not sleeping is terrible. Bringing it back to that equanimity idea, though, I mean, if you can't, or if there's something that's in the moment not fully under your control, can you challenge yourself to maybe think, okay, I'm not sleeping. Does it have to be a bad thing? Can I just sort of be in this moment as well? If I don't like this feeling, can I keep feeling it a little bit longer? I mean, just for those people, I think that of course are having a tough time, but are using that logic, which is, I don't like this, let me have it go away. That's where I would want to maybe say to them, okay, can you challenge yourself to regard it more neutrally, even for a few more minutes, almost like if someone said count sheep, which I know sounds kind of silly, right? It's more about you regarding it, right? It's more about saying, well, maybe I can't sleep right now, and maybe I can just rest right now. Like, there's really just not as much relief, but more acceptance of how you feel in that moment, being really mindful that no, you don't approve of it. And it's a moment that's going to last as long as it's going to last. So yeah, there's sleep hygiene, and people, I love for them to go look it up just to get some ideas of what that is. And there's also, again, that mindfulness aspect. Like, if you really don't like how you feel in that moment, can you be in that moment a little bit longer? Can you challenge yourself to say, this isn't necessarily a bad thing? Take away the label from it. Because I think that fuels the distress so much more. And so to kind of challenge yourself to keep it more neutral, hopefully can just make it so you can be in the moment more.
Well, that's a good advice. The sleep hygiene part is really, that's the, now anyone listening to this, just go to Google or ChatGPT. Yeah, check that out.
Be careful.
Definitely be careful.
Yes.
Definitely be careful with that.
Sleep hygiene, right? yeah, like sleep hygiene's the term, and stimulus control is the technical term as well. Mindfulness, I really do appreciate, as long as, it's taken in small strides and all that. You need some help to really learn mindfulness. But yes, yeah, I mean, do it, but be careful. Know that it's not the be all and end all of the information. There's a lot more help out there.
Yeah. Just be cognitive about your cognitive thinking whenever you are thinking with any tool, right? It is not just a search like Google search. It is more of a conversation with these tools. It goes on and on and on. So definitely,
Right.
Dr. Bechor, this has been an incredibly honest look at where the therapy, as an industry is heading. So thank you for not shying away from the uncomfortable parts of overdiagnosing or the underdiagnosing parts of the business. So where can people find you and learn more about your work?
Yeah. So, by the way, we could be here all day talking about overdiagnosis and underdiagnosis. I mean, I think it's fascinating. I think it's super important to think about. And just a little bit side note too. I myself might be on social media, look at reels, and be very attracted to it and want to believe it. And it might shape how I think for like a day, but I have to be very aware that that's just someone's take on something. And I've definitely seen a lot of misrepresentation of diagnoses. So yeah, we'd be here all day. That's my soapbox. Maybe another time we can talk about it. But certainly, yes, you can find more at my website. It's www.emblempsych.com. So again, emblemspsych.com. Maybe we can provide like a little links, after or wherever we post this and everything. And on social media as well. I mean, so we're on Facebook and Instagram, Emblem Psychology and Consulting. And then our email, it's info@emblemspsych.com. We'd love to get more traction, create more conversations. Please just reach out. I mean, like, it's just so exciting to get more traction out of this venue and things. So it's just, I mean, it's more than my pleasure to hear, if people want to just talk more about these topics. It would be wonderful.
So do you provide online consultations as well, along with in person?
Yeah. So actually we're primarily online as a practice right now. And like I was saying before, based on when the phone rings and who says what they need and everything, I'm kind of like ready and willing to start to shift for what I think people need as they're reaching me. I mean, not totally. I have an identity with my practice, but if let's say more people needed a lot of in-person support, or let's say if it was me even traveling and doing a workshop, something like that, I very, very willing and open to that. And yes, consultation, sure. I mean, so if someone's unsure about whether they would be a fit for, let's say, my practice, or if they're unsure about their fit for a certain diagnosis or help, overall, yeah, I mean, video consultations or free phone consultations just to assess fit, because on both ends, of course, for a patient, for a therapist, there has to be mutual fit. We have to both agree that we probably are the best fit for one another in this problem for this time, things like that.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you once again, Dr. Bechor. Thank you for your time and your valuable information. So we'll keep in touch. Good luck with your practice, and then I hope we will do one more session in the next 3 months.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great. Love to give you some updates. I so appreciate the conversation. Thanks for the opportunity.